Hi there, Serial Trader here. I'm just going to check in on Bitcoin. Hopefully everyone's having a great weekend so far. So just on the daily chart here, just I do a brief overview of where we're at. So nothing's changed as of yet on the daily. You can still easily make the case for WXY from our all-time highs to the 6,000 bottom. And then still have a five-wave sequence up for wave 1. You can still make the case for this WXYXZ wave 2 triple zigzag that did not make a new low below 6,000, and actually so far the low still stands at 64.2510. This is all Bitfinex pricing, by the way. And now you could still be making the case that we're now advancing in a new trend and that the bottom is behind us. You can make that case as long as the lows hold. But the real issue I've been having is the short-term price action, and let's just dig into the 4-hour to start with anyways. So from the most recent swing high, and that comes in at 91.7750, you still have a nice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, and we can say that that ended wave C of Z of 2, okay? And that works fine. Like a trend typically ends in a 5, not a 3, so nothing wrong with that. But it's the price action since then that's been a little bit troublesome. And in the last video, I had this label as an A, and then an A, B, C, D, E for B, triangle, and then a thrust out in C. But now we've extended past a point where I believe that C wave ABC up interpretation remains viable. So I kind of thought to myself, well, how can this be labeled as an impulsive advance off the bottom? Is that possible following the rules and guidelines of the wave principle, as much as this looks and felt like a triangle? And the answer is yes, it certainly can. So you can make the case you have a 1 up, 2 down here, then another 1, 2 of lesser degree, and then another 1, 2 of lesser degree still, and then a 3, 4, 5 of 3, then a 4, 5 of 3, and then a 4 and a 5, and I only labeled the subdivisions of this third since it's the extended wave, but in this 4 you still have an A, B, C down, and then you have a easily make the case for a 5-wave structure to finish off this 5th wave here. I just haven't labeled the subdivisions, but they're there. So this works. This is certainly a possible interpretation, and you can certainly make the case for 5 waves up because you do have a 1, 2, 3, 4 that does not overlap 1, okay, and then a 5th wave up. So there's certainly a sequence of 5 waves up where wave 2 does not fully retrace wave 1, and that's a rule, and wave 4 does not end in the price territory of wave 1, that's a rule. So by the rules of wave principle, this is certainly a 5-wave advance. Nothing wrong with that. And it it basically looks like one as well. And let's say we throw a base channel on here, okay? And that channel work is something you can do to help with your wave labeling. So for a base channel, you take the origin of wave 1, okay? Let me get the channel going here. Parallel channel. You take the origin of wave 1 off the extreme, right here, the extreme of wave 2, and then in parallel off the extreme of wave 1, and that's called your base channel. So if you can break out of your base channel, that's kind of like confirmation of 3rd wave price action, which we did. And then often the upper boundary line of the base channel will provide support for your 4th wave pullback, and we didn't even actually hit the upper boundary line. And then we came up. Okay? So that is certainly kind of a feather in the cap of that wave interpretation. Broke out the base channel and then didn't even have to test the upper line of support and then came up in 5. So if this is really the case, if we have 5 up here, and I mean, there's nothing to say that we're completely done going up here in this 5th, but it's starting to look like we are. And I'll just quickly bring up the oscillator. So if you look at this, 4-hour RSI is overbought, or certainly became overbought, and it's just starting to cool off. So typically it's not a great time for an entry when 4-hour RSI is overbought. And better let it cool off here. I'll get rid of those for now, since we're just doing purely price-based interpretation here. So what would I really like to see now as far as a trade setup or an entry, well, I'd like to see something along these lines. So if we have 5 up already, or once we have 5 up, it should be fairly soon if we don't, as things are fairly short-term overbought. You'd want to see something like this, okay? So you'd want to see some sort of, doesn't have to be a zigzag, although that's the most common correction, obviously. You'd want to see something along these lines, a corrective decline, okay? And let's just bring up some Fibonacci levels. Fibonacci retracement. So let's go off our origin of wave 1 to the extreme wave 5, okay? And I just have the 50, the 618, and the 786 labeled here. So if we come down, and if, you know, for instance, if this overall 5 up was a wave 1 of larger degree to start a new trend, we'd want to come down in some sort of wave 2, and, you know, common Fibonacci relationships for wave 2, the 50%, the 61.8%, and the 78.6%. And at this point, you know, no real certainty which one would be more probable. Now, once we have some more development in this correction, if we're starting one here, you can start doing some relationships between, you know, A and C, and once you have your BN, start trying to get a, you know, Fibonacci support zone, but we're not there yet. So at this point, from a trading perspective, have to give the upside the benefit of the doubt here, now that we do have a, you know, arguably a 5-wave structure up off the bottom, and wait for this 3-wave corrective decline, however it plays out. There will be a decline. It's not just going to shoot straight up. We're not in that stage of this market cycle yet. There's still an awful lot of resistance. Here, I'll just quickly go to the daily. There's still an awful lot of resistance levels to get past before we can have, you know, a crazy breakout where it just goes up and you can't even, you know, buy it fast enough to keep up. We're not there, but we could return there. Anyways, so right now, short-term bullishness aside, I would expect some sort of pullback here. And if it looks corrective, and if it sets up the way I want to see it set up, that will be an entry opportunity for then another 5-wave structure to the upside, and possibly a continuation of a new uptrend. So, not looking too bad here on Bitcoin, although certainly not looking good for an entry at this point. And again, the 4-hour RSI, you really don't want to be buying when 4-hour RSI is overbought. At least not until we're in true breakout mode, and then overbought doesn't mean much when you're making new highs, but right now it does mean something. So that's kind of my take on Bitcoin here. Certainly looking more promising for long-term bulls. Still some patience required. That's sometimes the hardest part, is just waiting for the setup to, I mean, as exciting as it might be to just buy here and try and chase it, I just don't think that's a great idea here. So patiently wait for that corrective decline. I'll certainly try and cover it as much as possible if and when it plays out here, as I'm looking to trade this myself. So hopefully that was helpful, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys. Serial Trader signing off.